Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Kurtz, and I'm also the founder of New Wings Coaching. I help and empower wild-hearted and adventurous women of faith feeling caged and stuck unlock their true purpose and potential, break free from limitations, and thrive with confidence, courage, and hope. If you're curious to learn more about coaching with me, head to newwingscoaching.net and be sure to explore the show notes for ways to connect with me further. Get ready to dive in as we uncover empowering keys and insights in this episode. So tune in and let's unlock hope together. Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm Kristen Kurtz, your host. I pray this episode is like a holy IV of hope for your soul. Please help me welcome Diane Brask to the show. I'm so excited to have her here. I want to give a little bit of the backstory to even how we got connected. I was outside on my deck, and I just felt this draw to go to the wilderness. Now, when I say the wilderness, there's a place that I've been going to for probably the last 7-8 years, and I usually like to go at least once or twice a year, and ended up going back to Wilderness Fellowship. It's a place in Wisconsin, and just kind of was able to squeeze in to a certain date, and I got to the office to check in, and Randy, the founder, was in the office and ended up being on a call with with Diane, and she said something that just like tickled me. Like, I loved what she said, and I won't say what she said here, but I was like, oh my goodness, I love her. So after they got off the phone, I was like, who is that lady? And he said, Diane, and he told me a little bit about her and how she was the founder of Global Seed Planters. Well, if you guys have been listening to the show for a while, you might know a little bit about the story behind Hope Unlocked even coming to be. And one of the reasons that I did start this was because the Lord showed me that this was going to be a seed cast, not a podcast. So anytime I hear seed, my heart kind of takes a little leap. So that's why she's here today. We've been able to get to know each other a little better, and we both would agree that we just feel like we're kindred spirits. So, Diane, would you be open to sharing more about yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
So my name is Diane Brask, and I grew up on a dairy farm in Northwest Wisconsin, about an hour and a half from the Twin Cities. Everything about my life is rural, and you might say is small. So I grew up on this small dairy farm. We had about 100 head of cattle. I actually went to a 2-room country schoolhouse, my grades 1 through 6, and I had only 6 people in my class. You would think I'm really old and Little House on the Prairie or something. But yeah, I had 6 in my class, grades 1 through 6. And then I graduated from Grantsburg High School with a class of 69. Then I went to Bethel College, graduated with a degree in social work, came back to this area and did rural youth ministry in 4 small towns. And then from there, kind of wild, but for 20 years, I did that from 1980 to 2000. Yeah. And in 2001, God did a major shift in my life and led me from little rural America to rural villages in the ends of the earth. So that's kind of broad strokes, Kristen, as to how I got to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, I know that there was one point in your life that you just allowed the Lord to just take over, and you had a piece of paper. I would love for you to share that story if you'd be open to it. It really impacted me when you shared that with me the last time we chatted.
You know, Kristen, that story, the blank piece of paper, literally changed my life. And I've shared that story many, many times, and it's never failed to change people's lives in every setting I'm in. There's something about the Holy Spirit on that experience that's just life-changing. So yeah, I can tell you about it. I was a senior at Bethel College in St. Paul, now Bethel University. And I went to a missions conference called Urbana. At that time, and I still think ongoing still now, it's something that's held every 3 years with the goal that for once in your college life, you'd be able to attend this missions conference. It's several days. It's from right after Christmas till the stroke of midnight on the new year. So I'm in Champaign, Illinois, at the Urbana University campus for this mega missions conference with college age students. The last night is always like the home run speaker, right? Last night was Billy Graham. I will never forget that night or what he said. I don't remember a single other speaker in the whole Urbana conference, but I won't forget Billy. He didn't do his typical talk. It wasn't your typical evangelistic outreach filling a crusade. He was talking to Christian kids, Christian young people, college students. And this is the challenge he gave. He said, I imagine that all of you have been challenged many times in your life to set goals for your life. Way back when you were in elementary school, even. What do you want to do? What do you want to be when you get to high school? Or what goals do you want to set now as you're young? Write down some steps. How are you going to get there? Maybe when you're a kid, you're admiring, the varsity football players, and you're thinking, man, when I get to high school, I want to play varsity. Or when I get to high school, I want to be the valedictorian. Or, I want to go to this college and I want to have maybe this job when I grow up. And so he said, all your life, different people, parents, teachers, coaches, pastors have challenged you, set goals and steps to get there and begin to work on achieving your goals. And he said, I know all you guys are Christians, or the vast majority of you are. So you have probably prayed about all of these goals. No doubt you have asked the Lord to guide you, to bless you, to make these goals come true. He said, I'd like you to think of it a little differently. So just in your mind's eye, turn over this piece of paper that you have, that you've imagined all your goals on, flip it over to a blank piece of paper. Oh, I forgot something, Kristen. He said on the front page, when you have all your goals down, what you want is for God to sign his name on the bottom of that piece of paper and make all your goals come true. So now flip the paper over. Now you have a blank piece of paper. Nothing's written on it. No goals, no steps, no objectives. Write your name on the bottom of the piece of paper and date it. So mine would have been December 31st, 1974, Diane M. Brask. Now hold that blank piece of paper up to the Lord and say, here's my life, Lord. It's not mine. It's yours. You created me with your goals and your purposes for my life, the things you intended for my life to achieve. I don't know what they are, but you do. So here's my life, Lord, unscripted. My name is signed at the bottom and dated. Now you go ahead and write anything you want on the pages of my life. Whew.
Right?
Right, Kristen? Like, if you would have asked me that night if Jesus was Lord of my life, I would have said, absolutely. I've been a Christian since I was 7.
Yeah.
But when Billy described it that way, I just thought, man, I've kind of had Jesus along for the ride. I kind of want to make sure that he's sitting in the back seat of my car, but I don't know that I want him on the steering wheel,
Right.
And so I was very, very touched by the Holy Spirit and very convicted as well. And I said, wow, Lord, I've never thought of it like this.
Right.
This is the first time I've seen that you just want me, that surrender means my name's at the bottom of the page and you go ahead and write anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want on the blank pages of my life. So I said, I'm on. Yeah. Let's do this.
Let's do this. I love it.
Let's do this, Lord. And I talked out loud in my seat. I can almost take you to my seat at Urbana and where I was sitting. Everybody else emptied the stadium and I sat there by myself as janitors cleaned out the stadium. And I just said, Lord, I graduate in 5 months. I was thinking I was going to be a social worker, but if you had something else in mind, you can change it. I just need to know because I'm out of here in 5 months, And was I even close? And, Kristen, that night, it might have been the first time I felt like I heard the Lord's voice. He spoke so clearly, and it wasn't out loud, but it was like out loud in my head, if I can say it that way. I just knew God was speaking to me, and these were not just thoughts in my head. And he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I did have something else in mind. And I literally, I kind of jolted. I looked up and said, you're kidding. Like, what? And he said, I wanted you to work with youth, but not in social work, because do you really believe that social work and all those psychologists, B.F. Skinner and Carl Rogers and Freud and all those guys, do you think they're the answer to young people's problems? And I said, no, Lord, I don't. You know that. And he said, I am. And I can transform a young person's life in a moment more than any of these people can do with, years of counseling.
Right.
And so I said, okay, that sounds fine. So he said, I want you to be a youth pastor, a youth worker, not a, social worker. And I said, but Lord, I don't have any training in it. I don't even know what a youth pastor is. We don't have them up in my area because all our churches were too small for youth pastors. Yeah. He said, you don't have to worry about that because I'll teach you. And then I said, where are we going to do this? And he said, I want you to go back to your hometown where you graduated. I want you to work with high school students where you grew up. And you know what, Kristen? I sat in my seat and bawled. I just cried, not because I was so thrilled. I cried because I couldn't believe that I had to go back to the dead end place where I grew up. And so I tried to get God to change his mind. And you know what he said? Hey, didn't you just sign the blank piece of paper?
Oh, you're caught red-handed there.
I was caught, right? And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, then that's what I want you to do.
Wow.
So I did. I went back to the area I'm talking to you from, actually.
Love it.
And I spent 20 years from 1980 to 2000 working with high school students, and not with a local church. We were targeting unchurched, public high school, raw, real, lost kids.
Yeah.
That were drinking a lot of beer and smoking a lot of pot and sleeping around a lot. And we were trying to introduce them to this amazing Jesus. Wow. And so that's where I learned kind of the nuts and bolts of what ministry is.
Yeah. Well, can I ask, just for those who might be, reaching that, that generation currently, like, what did that look like for you to, reach them and to, I can't imagine that it was an easy path.
It was definitely not an easy path. I think it's Charles Dickens that says a famous line. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. We literally did not know what to do. Keep in mind, no training. Right. So I wasn't a youth ministry major at Bethel. I didn't grow up with youth ministry. We didn't have a youth pastor in our church. Mm-hmm. So what it looked like was being pretty much scared spitless. Yeah. It was a friend of mine and I, in fact, the very first person I led to the Lord outside of high school. She was a classmate in my high school, drinker, smoker, really lost. Yeah. And I started praying for her. And when we were 19, I was at Bethel and she was at UW Stout, Menominee. Mm-hmm. And one night she said to me, I've been watching you for a long time and I want what you've got. Please come and pick me up after work and talk to me about what it is to be a Christian. Mm. And so we started together. Isn't it interesting that God would bring a classmate and I together, and one that I'd been, a Christian since I was a kid, and Chris was not. And so she had an understanding of lost that I didn't. And she knew how lost people live in the world. We were really a good team. Yeah. But we were clueless. So what it looked like, pretty much, there were 4 towns in the area: Grantsburg, Siren, Webster, and Frederick. Mm-hmm. We spent Mondays in Grantsburg, Tuesdays in Frederick. Wednesday was kind of your designated church night, Thursdays in Siren, and Fridays in Webster. We hung out, whatever the schools were doing, a volleyball game, basketball game, track meet. We just spent a ton of time with kids. We went to their events. Jesus, the Bible says the word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's what Jesus did. He hung out. And so we hung out with high school students. We also went every day for lunch at each of the respective schools. We just go to the cafeteria and have lunch and hang out. We had an agreement with the school principal and the school board. We would not proselytize. Okay. We would not hand out, tracts. We would not be Bible thumpers. We'd be friends. I love the series, The Chosen, that just shows Jesus being very real.
Right.
Just hanging out with his disciples every day and going from village to village and interacting with real people. That's kind of like what our youth ministry was. It was a bit like Young Life.
Yeah.
Where you just hang with the lost and you do relational evangelism. You look for opportunities to tell young people about Jesus. We also did a lot of events. Some of those, again, were relational, like we do bike trips up the North Shore from Duluth to Canada. We go on Boundary Waters canoe trips, go on camping trips, but we also did a lot of loading up buses or vans, going down to the cities for Christian concerts. But we got to a point where we were believing God to bring the best right to our little area. So we had Nikki Cruz come, who was famous for being, a convert from New York City, leading a gang, very famous evangelist. He came and did 4 days of evangelism in our little communities. We even had the local bar advertise the conference on their marquee.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was because we had also done bar ministry. The bars knew us. We hung out with them. Because if you're going to catch fish, you got to go where they are.
Right.
We got people praying a lot. At one point, we had every student in every high school being prayed for every day.
Oh my gosh.
We contacted Nashville, Tennessee, and asked them when they drove in between Chicago and Minneapolis if they'd have one night stopover in a little rural town. And they do it for free because we didn't have money, but we had lost kids and we couldn't fill, the Target Center, but we could fill our high school gym. Yeah. And so a lot of young people that came to the Lord over special events that we did too. And I was here doing that from 1980 when I graduated from Bethel until 2000.
Incredible. Oh my gosh.
It was a long haul.
During that 20 years, could you share, is there kind of a top of mind testimony that you'd be open to sharing with the listeners about maybe somebody that you were able to reach that maybe seemed just so unreachable, but you kept on pursuing?
Well, I might talk to you about the first 3. Mm-hmm. The first story that pops into my mind, not the roughest kids, but I was going to Bethel and I took a month off. I wanted to work with an organization up here. And so I worked with, it was a youth organization that I ended up becoming the next director of. But we went to a school one day for lunch, and I stood in the doorway of the cafeteria, glancing over, this small town cafeteria, and I saw 3 high school girls doing what high school girls normally do, flirting with the football game, was very clear that they were making a move on them. And so I said to the guy I was with, "Who are those 3 girls right there?" And he told me their names. And I said, "Well, I only have this fall." I think it was the fall of my junior year of Bethel, quote unquote. I said, I can't reach a whole town or a whole school, but I want those three right there. So he told me their names. Yeah. And I said, I am going to pray for those girls that they will become Christians every day. And I'm going to go after them. So I literally pursued them. Hey, you guys want to come out to the farm and go horseback riding? Hey, let's go down to the cities to this concert. Want to go see a movie? I was just looking for every opportunity that I could to be with all three of them or each of them, individually.
Yeah.
And so I'm not kidding, Kristen. Every single day, morning, noon, and night, pretty much, I would pray that those girls would get saved. And you know what? Every single one. Over the course of a year, it wasn't all just that fall, but they all gave their lives to Jesus. Now, let me fast forward. One of them, the first one to get saved, is married, has 5 daughters, and is the grandma of 1, 2, 3, 4, and another one on the way. I see her when we can every Thursday night. I led her to the Lord in the fall of 78. And it is now 2024. And if all I did in my entire life was lead her to the Lord, my life would be worth it. Because not only is she saved, she married a Christian. She's raising 5 adult Christian daughters. 4 of them are married. Just the youngest is not. She's a senior at Bethel. And now they're raising Christian families. You know what? I'm just watching this unbelievable multiplication. Short on another one. I see her every year. She doesn't live as close to me, but every single Christmas, she sends me a check for $250 and says, I will be forever grateful for you leading me to Jesus.
Oh my goodness, Diane.
And that is 1978. But I'm just saying, if I was to say anything to a listening audience, would be this. Who do you know that is lost? Yeah. And what commitment have you made to pray for them? Because I firmly believe, Kristen, that for almost everyone in the world who saved, somebody was praying for them by name. Yeah. Because part of our partnership with God is seeking and saving the lost.
Thank you for sharing this testimony. I mean, the fact that you are still connected, like every Thursday, every year, like the impact you made, that seed, like what we have that deep connection with, the seed, right?
Right.
I think sometimes, people might be, I was actually at a women's group last night talking about evangelism, and, some people have a fear of, sharing the gospel or sharing Jesus with others for fear of rejection. But, even one of your examples was your friend that initially got into the mission field with you, in essence. She was just watching you. You didn't even have to go like barreling down her door. You know what I mean? Like, some people need that. Like me, I needed somebody to like barrel down my door almost at one point. But one of the 2 words that I like to share with people is just be available. Like, go search after the one.
Exactly. And don't make it into, look again, we talk about the chosen, right? Mm-hmm. Look again at Jesus. You can't see him using a track. You can't see him using a formula. ABCD, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 steps to peace with God or whatever. I grew up with that. Jesus was relational evangelism, one, and he was also a seed planter all the time. And his seeds were stories. In the book of Mark, it says, Jesus always told stories. In fact, he never did anything without telling a story. What led people to the kingdom, to the Father, was Jesus' masterful ways of telling stories and embedding questions, because he was always sending you away to think about, hey, did you see the way he looked at that guy today when he asked him that question? Or wasn't that story amazing about the farmer who went out to plant some seeds?
Yeah.
That's really the story of my life. I'm a farmer who's planting seeds all over the world. And I started right at home.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I'd love for you, like that was, so if we look at the page, right? So you've got that first page where you fully surrendered. This next page was, the 20 years. I know that there was something that happened to move into another chapter, to usher you into going global, which is incredible. Could you tell us a little bit what that looked like? Even like, how did that shift happen?
It's another seed story, really. But it was also, I think all of us, I have an advantage. I'm not sure how old you are, Kristen, but I'm 67 now. So I have these rear view mirrors on the side of my head where I can look back and see my whole life. And so now it's a lot easier than looking ahead through the windshield and just seeing wide open spaces, right? So when I look back on the 90s, my last 10 years, I can see that God was stirring in my heart about the nations. But I was so locked into where I was and the youth ministry that I was doing, I kind of like feel like I put the earmuffs on once in a while and went la, 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 because I liked what I was doing. But God was like during that 10 years in the 90s, I had an unusual experience in the Philippines that was life changing and redirecting my life. I also had Lauren Cunningham come to my little rural area and do a world global missions conference. And I had an opportunity to speak to Dr. Ralph Winter, that was considered the world's greatest missiologist. Oh, and in there somewhere, I took a perspectives missions course too. Anyway, so that stirring was all happening in those 10 years. Like something's going on where God's making it clear, like there's a lot more out there than just your little rural county, right? But what sealed the deal was standing at the graveside of my dad on December 4th, 2000. Um, Cold, bitter, bitter day, and a really sad day. Because if you're a farmer's daughter, I'm not saying all farmers' daughters have this relationship, but I'm telling you what, I spent more time with my dad than any daughter I know, because I worked with him. Because we did chores together at 6 o'clock in the morning. Because, in the summertime, I always had 3 meals with my dad: breakfast, lunch, and supper. We called it breakfast, dinner, and supper. But we also had forenoon coffee and afternoon goodies and bedtime snacks. I just was with my dad a lot. We talked so much. For me to stand at his graveside was like to cut off half of my body. So I'm pretty choked up, and I can't believe this day is really here. And just, in that grieving, reflective time as we're doing the committal service and about to lower his casket into the ground. And I felt a hand on my right shoulder. And so I turned to see which one of my family was comforting me, and nobody was touching me. And then the same kind of thing as Urbana. And I hear this voice. So, honey, this is the last page of the last chapter of a really hard, long book. But mark this day, Diane. Except a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But when it dies and is buried, it grows up to produce many seeds and a great harvest. That's what I'm going to do through your life on the day your dad's being buried. All that's been planted in you, it's going to grow up, and your life is going to produce a mighty harvest as you bury the seed of your dad today. Then he says, I mean, there's times at that time where I thought, am I just imagining all of this stuff because it sounds so clear in my head? I'm not making this up. Well,
Right.
then he says, so get ready, Diane, because you are going to fly, 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 fly. I'm going to send you all over the United States. You're going to be speaking in places and in churches that you've never heard of. And I'm standing there, Kristen, thinking, yeah, right. Just how is this going to happen? Nobody knows me, Lord. I'm just a farm girl here in Nowheresville, Wisconsin. I'm not ordained. I'm not licensed. I've just had this podunk little ministry. And now you're telling me I'm going to be flying all over the United States? I don't have any money.
Yeah.
Like, how is this going to happen?
Right.
And he said, that's not your responsibility. That's mine.
Amen.
But then it's not just that, Diane. You have been having stirrings in your heart about the world. And I'm going to send you, I'm going to open up the doors and send you to little rural villages all over the world that have never heard my name and have never seen a white person in the history of their villages.
Yeah.
And now I'm really like blown away. Like, how is that going to happen? I don't even know an unreached people group. I haven't been to remote little world. He just said again, that's not your responsibility. It's kind of like back to the blank piece of paper, right, Kristen?
Right.
You
Exactly.
just signed your name and it's all unwritten for you, but I'll take care of writing it out.
Right. Yeah.
1 month later, and at this time, when I'm standing at my dad's graveside, I don't have. I think I had less than $100 to my name. I don't have a savings account. I don't have anything.
Yeah.
And within a month, I have a ticket for a trip around the world with a friend of mine. And we're out all over Kingdom Come, and we start at India, has the most unreached people groups of any country in the world. And we're with the lowest caste, what's considered the scum of the earth. They're lower than rats. I spend 1 month going from little rural village to little rural village, never heard of Jesus, never seen a white person. And I get to be the first one to tell them there's a God named Jesus who loves you.
Okay. Can I back it up for a second? So
Yeah, you can.
this friend that came along, so you have $100 in your pocket, you don't have savings. All of a sudden you have a ticket to fly around the world. Tell us the how behind that. Like, who is this
There
friend?
was just, okay, so the friend is, wow, this story. Yeah, you ask good questions. The friend is Missy.
Okay.
She's a physical therapist who's just graduated from Pennsylvania. Her
Okay.
first job was in a town called Rice Lake, Wisconsin.
Okay.
I got to know her because she was attending a church in Spooner, Wisconsin called Cornerstone. They were sending their youth group on a trip to Trinidad, and Missy hadn't worked with youth, so they knew me and said, hey, would you be willing to go with Missy on this mission trip and help her out in Trinidad? That's how we got to meet each other, got to know each other. On the flight home, she's asking me more about, well, what do you do? And blah, blah, blah. And I told her, and she said, do you have any trips planned? And I said, not right now, but actually, I would someday like to take a trip around the world to kind of remote rural villages in difficult nations. And she said, really? She said, I think I'd like to do that one with you. And so that's how that started. And then when God spoke to me at the funeral, then I got a hold of her and I said, you know what? I think we should go this next year early. Why don't we do like 10 weeks and go like India, Hong Kong, China, Philippines, see where else we might squeeze in. To be perfectly honest with you, Kristen, I don't remember exactly where that money all came from. I know that there was some gifts of sympathy that just came like, wow, let's send some money to the family. But I had enough, and back then it wasn't that much. And I also lived with the people I was with. So I wasn't staying in hotels. It was go and I lived in some mud huts in bush villages. It was pretty simple living. So it was basically the airfare. And I want to say, I'm guessing at this, that our total airfare might have been in the 7,000, 7,500 ish range, something like that. All I know is there was enough money provided to go for 10 weeks and not go in debt.
Incredible. I mean,
This is the thing I've seen, Kristen, is I've been living like this since 1980. So 44 years, I've solely lived by faith. I've lived on donations only my whole career. What people donate. I've never had a normal job with a normal salary, with benefits or anything. Since the blank piece of paper, I've just said, God, whatever you want to write on that blank piece of paper, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll stay as long as you want me to stay. I'll do anything you want me to do. You just have to pay for it. And you need to pay for it in advance because you said, "Oh, no man anything except a debt of love." So I have lived my whole life trusting that where God guides, he'll provide. And if he doesn't, then I didn't hear right or the timing's wrong. I think in my whole life, there's only 2 times I haven't gone where I thought God wanted me to go. And both times was South Africa, and both times it was I didn't have any money come in.
wow.
So, I can sit here at 67 years old and say, my Redeemer is faithful and true. I can write books on the faithfulness of God in my life. Little things, big things, the world. I mean, I've been to about 50 nations now, somewhere between 40 and 50 nations, many of them several times. I've been to China several times. I've been to the Philippines several times. I've been to Uganda several times. And I'm talking like a dozen each. God has faithfully covered everything. But I saw the same thing in the youth ministry. I took kids to Mexico, youth group kids to Mexico, and some of these kids, they didn't come from Christian homes, and hadn't gone to any churches because they'd been recently saved. So they said, "We don't have any way to raise money. We can't talk to, our church or our aunt and uncle or whoever." And I said, "Don't worry about it. We're going to just pray." I said, "It's God's the one who said go into all the world. So if he wants you to go, it's his job to pay for it. So you just plan like you're going, and we're just going to pray and see what God does." I never had to leave a kid behind because of not enough money. Never once.
Man, I can just imagine how many hearts you are just infusing with hope right now.
I sure hope so, Kristen, because I just want to encourage everyone that's listening. Like Carrie Underwood sings, "Jesus, take the wheel," right?
Yeah.
Like whoever is listening to this, surrender your life fully. It doesn't mean like you just give a part of your life to the Lord, just enough so you have your fire insurance policy to keep you out of hell and into heaven. That's not the Christian life. Just surrender 100% and just say, "Lord, my life is yours." And then just watch what he does. And listen for the still small voice that will keep guiding your next steps.
And I love, as you were listening for his, you might have just been, sitting in that auditorium, even questioning, like, is this you, Lord?
Right.
Am I hearing this right? And I don't know about you, but especially over my last 7 years, especially since I've been more prone to let him take the wheel. I still have areas that I'm like, we're still working on this. And I don't know if it's like that for everybody, but anyways, so I'm still a work in progress myself over here, but I'm really a big proponent now to, I love what you were saying, how Billy Graham was really questioning, a lot of kids that maybe are in school and they're really pushing you to do this thing, but he's like, no, I have a plan for you, and it's actually better than that plan. And I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of got wrapped up into that plan, kind of started going on the trajectory of what the world would want you to do, and it's hard to come out of that sometimes. I'm
It really is. I think it's been taught all wrong. It's twisted. There's a lot of books out there for Christians, adults and young people, on, like Dare to Dream and planning how how you're going to serve God. Notice in the Bible, no one had a plan of how they were going to serve God. He's always the initiator. Look at
yeah,
Moses, right? It's not that Moses, oh, I got a plan. I'm going to bring my people out of Egypt. No, he encounters a burning bush and it's all God. I got a plan.
mhm,
It's not Moses has a plan. It's not Gideon has a plan.
right,
It's not Esther has a plan.
yeah,
No, in every case I'm bringing up, it's God initiates contact and relationship with somebody who's pretty ordinary, by the way. And then he tells them what his plan is. And then they get a choice. Are they going to follow it or not? But I can't think of any case in the Bible where someone comes to God and says, hey, I'm ready now. And look how wonderful I am. And I'm prepared and I'm gifted and I'm talented. And I'm just here to sign up, to do this for you. We always have these ideas, and God is just saying, I'm waiting and looking for the humble one, the ordinary one, the simple one that will be so quick to give me all the glory because they'll know it's not all about them.
exactly. Amen. Moses is one of my favorites. I was actually just talking about him last night. Because I think a lot of people, and I don't know if you experienced this when you were first heading out, or if you've always felt like you've had a really strong voice that doesn't have any hindrances on it. But a lot of women that I talk to, I find that they, maybe are more challenged to speak or speak up or kind of take a stand. Who knows? There's something that kind of has tried to cut off their voice, right?
Right, right.
I was talking about this last night, and even part of my own story as well with my own voice. But with Moses, I love, like, he may have had a speech impediment, right? Like, that's what we
Yeah.
understand. God knew that, and he chose him anyways, right?
I think it's a pattern of God, don't you think, Kristen? Like, look who he chose for his disciples. Did he go to the highly educated ones? No,
No,
he went to the rednecks up in Galilee.
right.
that talked funny, and even in Acts it says they were unschooled ordinary men. So he didn't pick big shots. He didn't pick people that were incredibly gifted.
Mhm.
He chose ordinary people. A lot of these guys were smelly fishermen. They didn't have some big job.
Right,
And I think that whenever we think that we can't serve God because fill in the blank,
right,
that's exactly who God is looking for.
exactly.
I think for me, if there was any secret to all of this, why I will want to hear and follow now, it's because when I was 16 years old, I was having my devotions one night and I came across the woman who snuck in the back door of the Pharisees' party, Simon's party, and went and knelt down behind Jesus at his feet and broke open a jar of perfume and wiped his feet with her hair and her tears and made a big scene. I mean, this was like a PDA off the charts, right? I'm 16 when I'm reading this. We're not supposed to be slobbering over each other in the halls of our public high school. We're supposed to have a grip, right? No PDAs in the hall. Now I'm reading this for my devotions and going, my gosh, this woman is way over the top. I mean, get a room, And yet Jesus ends up honoring her in the story and really coming down on the religious person. And the story jumped out at me. And I said to the Lord, I was just alone in my bedroom, and I said to the Lord, I am the Pharisee. I'm the religious person. I've gone to church, Lord, all my life. I know all the Bible stories. Yet here is this woman who's of ill repute, who has a foul reputation. She probably is known as sleeping around, And I said, here she is carrying on with Jesus, and it's her that Jesus acknowledges. And I said, I've never known anybody, Lord, that's ever done a PDA for you. I've never known anyone who is willing to make a scene because they love you so much. And here's this woman, she probably doesn't really even know you, but she's heard enough about you to know that you really love people. And she's just hoping that you'll love her too. And I said, I want to find out what it looks like to be head over heels in love with you, not just have a head full of knowledge and be full of religion. I want to know what it looks like to be in love with you. And that's where this journey of the stories and stuff really happened too, because once I fell in love with Jesus and have worked to maintain that now for 51 years, I'm telling you what, Kristen, I'll go anywhere. I'll go to the ends of the earth for him because he loves me.
Yes.
And I love him.
Oh my God. I want to touch on, I feel like we need to go back to your first trip. Is that okay?
Yep.
What happened there? Like what happened to you on that first trip? Because I'm imagining something fired up in you to ignite the next chapter.
Probably the next whole part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I am in village after village after village. I probably go to 50, 60 different villages that month. I see suffering and poverty on a level I have never seen in any form or comprehended in my wildest imaginations. I don't see a bathroom for a month. I don't see electricity. I hardly ate a thing. I mean, the food was next to non-existent. I suffered on a level I have never suffered on any mission trip since with my friend. Thank God I wasn't alone.
Sure.
But it wasn't that kind of suffering I saw that impacted me the most. It was the spiritual suffering because nobody heard of Jesus. Now, it's a people group of 10 million.
10 million?
10 million that almost all live in rural villages, remote. I'm not talking about you have a map to get to these or a GPS. I'm talking that if you weren't one of them and knew where that village was, there was no way you were going to get there. Most people never got beyond 5 to 10 miles from where they were born because there was no mode of transportation other than your feet. So you were born in a hellhole and you died in a hellhole and you never heard of Jesus and you went straight to hell. Like this was shaking on a level that I can never describe. I was shook my friend and I would lay in bed at night in our mud hut or wherever we are and talk till we couldn't stay awake any longer about what we witnessed that day. And I am just like, Missy, I've been told since I was in high school that Jesus could come back anytime. That's not the Bible I'm reading. I said, Jesus made it very clear. This gospel of the kingdom must be preached in all nations, ethnos, ethnicities, and then the end will come. And And this people group is not one of them. And then you go to the last book in the Bible, and it's clear what the finish line will look like. And there will be people around the throne from every nation, tribe, and tongue, every language, every dialect will be present in heaven. And we're not close to that yet, Kristen. And I'm seeing it in India. And I am just going, Lord, I would cry with Jesus sometimes. I just say, Lord, I'm so sad for you. You came over 2,000 years ago and you laid it all down. And the last four words you said were ends of the earth. And then you ascended. And here we are 2,000 years later, and we haven't made it to the ends of the earth yet because I'm standing here. So that was the real game changer, boy, India. India was stark and harsh. And, the other thing I saw in India, Kristen, was just how, I don't know what the word is, how hopeless Hinduism is. I visited a Hindu temple, and I said to the Hindu priest in the temple, just how many gods do you have anyway? And he said, 300 million.
300 million?
300 million. And I said to him, wow, that's a lot of gods. Do you know them all? And he goes, yes, ma'am, every single one. And I said, no, that's impossible, sir. We have about 300 and I think 25 million in our country at that time. And I said, that would be like me knowing every single person in the United States. And I said, you know what? I just have one God. His name is Jesus. He's amazing. He's my friend. We talk. We share dreams. I know him and he knows me. I wouldn't trade my one Jesus for all 300 million of your gods. Then we talked for about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And I asked him if he could tell me the name of the God that is nice. Do you guys have a nice God? Because I've never seen so many miserable people. I said, everywhere I go, I see miserable, miserable Hindus. And I think what they really want to know is who's the God that's kind? Who's the God that's nice? Because they can't find him.
And what did he say?
He was speechless, literally speechless. He had nothing to say.
You confronted the very life that he's always lived and hasn't known anything beyond that.
And I was in his temple, so I'm looking at scores of idols. And I pointed, it's like alcoves on the outside walls, kind of like your bay window, right? And so I say to him, see that lady and I was nice. I wasn't being like confrontational in my tone or anything, but I see that lady that's praying over there to that idol? I said, the idol is intricately carved. I mean, all the parts are there. So, but it has eyes carved in its marble head, but those eyes can't see her. It has ears. I can see that, but those ears are not listening. And it has a mouth, but it's not speaking. And I said, my Jesus, he's alive. He's not a painting or a carving or an idol. He has eyes that see and ears that hear and a mouth that speaks. And he knows me. And he knows you. Yeah, it was I bet the guy never, ever forgot our conversation.
I can only imagine. And again, you planted a seed, right?
Exactly. But that whole trip, Kristen, planted so many seeds that I never got away from. And so I just said to the Lord on that trip, he just set up the whole thing. That's what God does to me often. He sets up an experience because I'm an experiential learner. He sends me someplace in the world and he has every day planned out. And then he has it all set up to get after my heart. Because he knows if he gets my heart, I'll do anything, right? And so that trip got me like, Lord, for the rest of my life, I just want you to send me one way or another to rural villages that need to know you. And he's done just that. My I was born in a rural village area. I served for 20 years, rural towns in Northwest Wisconsin, and then he sent me all over the world, 40, 50 different countries. Again, rural villages off the beaten path where nobody else wants to go.
Seriously, it's so wild, isn't it? He's so wild. God is so just amazing and wild.
He's wild. He's wild. It's like that quote. I can't remember it right now. It's one of those Aslan.
Yeah.
So is he nice?
Yeah.
No, no, not necessarily nice, but he's good. He's good and he's wild. He's wild. That's one of the I'm wired for adventure. It's one of the things I like most about God and me because he knows I like wild. And so he's been really good at dishing it out.
This is definitely one of our common stitchings of being wild. Like I always say, I'm like wild and free, and I'm like he calls me a woman of wonder. I'm just always wondering about what's out there, and I haven't traveled the world like you have, but maybe someday that will change. I mean, I have in some ways. I guess this seed cast is going around the world, and I've met people from around the world. But again, we all have different, paths, right? We have different ways that he's calling us to reach the nations. And it could be sometimes for me, I think, well, my conversation I have with somebody at the grocery store could be a conversation that then they have with somebody in China. Who knows? Like
Exactly.
you know what I'm
It's
saying?
all a path of obedience. We never know. And wild can mean different things. I mean, for me, okay, it's a wild thing that we met. It's a wild thing we're on this podcast together. And I'm not in another country. I'm sitting by a wood stove with the fire warming me in a very comfortable home. But this is a wild conversation, and it never would have happened without a wild God deciding, hey, I'm going to connect these two.
Yeah. And for him to send me to when I see wilderness, I see wild first. I see this
Yeah.
to go out into the wild and into the wilderness. And because of that drawing out, we connected, and it's so fun. I love it.
You know, the wilderness's theme verse, I love this. It's from Hosea.
Mhm.
I will take you into the wilderness and speak tenderly to you there. I will restore your vineyards and make your valley, it's kind of like a valley of pain, into a door of hope.
Yes.
Like this is our God. He wants to take us into the wilderness, into wild places. But in those wild places, when we're away from all of our screens and all of our schedules, we hear that still small voice that restores broken places and sets before us a door of hope.
Yes, it's
Oh,
absolutely one of my
so
favorite
great.
verses, especially when it comes to even this podcast, Hope Unlocked. It is. There's for me, I have to like be drawn away to a secluded place on my own. And what better place than to go to Wilderness Fell? I don't even know how many people I've told about it. I mean, probably hundreds.
It's a good advertisement. So, anyone listening, if you need a place where you yearn to get alone, shut down your schedule, get off all of the technology, and just go someplace where you can hear God, go to the Wilderness Fellowship near Frederick, Wisconsin. They have 11 gorgeous prayer cabins tucked away in the woods where you can go spend a few days and just unplug. So many people have had a personal encounter with God that's healed and changed and shifted their lives because they got quiet and they got in a quiet place where they could hear his still small voice. So I think both Kristen and I would say go to the Wilderness Fellowship, look it up, wildernessfellowship.org, and come up near me. I'm a neighbor to the Wilderness Fellowship. So maybe we can go out for coffee then too. But
You're good.
yeah, anyway, it's something else.
Well, let's talk a little bit about global seed planters, not partners, global seed planters. So obviously, you're ushered into, um, going outside of your rural area to the nations, right? So how did global seed planters get established? Like, what did that process look like? Because I know
Can
the
we
people that are listening that maybe want to start a ministry and they're just like, I don't even know what to do, right?
can we take a pause on that question and I'll answer it after going to the bathroom?
Oh, for sure. I'm going to pause the stream here.
Okay.
All right, we are back. We just took a little commercial break, and Dan would love for you to share a little bit more about how Global Seed Planters got started and what it's looked like for you, just
Sure.
even though you've been on mission.
Okay, so I told you that story about my dad dying. So that was December 4th, 2000, when we buried him. And so in 2001, in January, was when I had my first trip to really tough places in the world. And the first place was India, rural villages in India. So I come back from that trip, having spent 10 weeks in rough places of Asia. And I just really felt like this was Jesus. I mean, the Holy Spirit spoke at my dad's graveside, and I needed to be obedient to that call. So I went actually to an organization in the Twin Cities out in Minnetonka area called International Ministerial Fellowship, IMF. It's not the International Monetary Fund, keep in mind. It's International Ministerial Fellowship.
Yeah.
So I went and talked with them about my life, my 20 years in youth ministry, what I sensed God was calling me to do now, and if they would be willing to be my covering, my 501c3, the place where people would send their money if they wanted to donate or partner with me. They became they were better than McDonald's. They were my Happy Meal deal, let me just say. They went to the mailbox and got my donations. They receipted my donors. They wrote my newsletter. They basically said you have to go through, a licensing process where you're interviewed and your references are checked and you're calling. You have to fill out a lot of paper. You have to fill out some questions related to your theology and your theological positions and support them scripturally, write your testimony, have several references. And then they became the place that covered me. I don't know where I'd be without them. They
You're
were they were awesome. So from 2001 to 2014, they were like the Christian this is what they do. They serve servants. So they were my official ministry covering. In 2014, they said to me, Diane, you've gotten too big for us. Like, your ministry takes a lot of work from our staff team because of what you're doing. We think it's time for you to incorporate and start your own legally recognized Christian mission organization. They call them 501c3s. So I believe it was April of 2014, I became incorporated, and then is when you have to have a name. So my whole from 2000 till now, I've been doing the same thing, but I didn't have my own name. But in 2014, when I incorporated, I became Global Seed Planters. And so I've just continued the focus that I had then, but now I've had to carry all the weight of being official, hiring your own staff team, putting on your big girl pants, raising all of your own funds, all that stuff. So I had to do adulting in 2014.
So you started to be an adult when you were 57?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, start when I say adulting, that's when I became inked. But keep in mind, I've been doing full-time ministry since I graduated from Bethel.
It's so incredible. And obviously, I'm kidding around with you, but one of the things and I don't know if you would agree with this, but the fact that you basically became your own, obviously in partnership with the Lord at 57, to me, it's a reminder to others, like it's never too late either.
Right. Right.
And I'm imagining that you probably didn't go get trained on how to do it, how to get it all, figured out.
Yeah,
You might have had some help, right?
right. I had a lot of help. And so there's nothing, you don't have to figure it out all yourself, because the body of Christ is a pretty big family. And there, for women especially, I mean, ministry still is largely a man's world. I've gone through a lot of hell being a woman in a man's world. That's a whole nother podcast. Um, but it has not been an easy journey, being a woman in what is predominantly a man's world. But I'm following the greatest man ever. And so one time I asked Jesus about all the hell I was going through, and he said, "Listen, Diane, I'm a gentleman, and gentlemen always open doors for ladies." Isn't that the best line? I mean, whenever things get a little tough, if there's a door in front of me that slams shut, I never try to open it, because Jesus already told me whatever door I'm supposed to go through, he'll open it for me, because that's what gentlemen do.
That visual, that when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh. I think in pictures. So when you said that, the story just like opened up my eyes to something for myself even. So thank you.
Right. So, but I think then it's a matter of two pursuing, when we know that God's called us into something. I knew that I needed to get under a 501c3 or B1. I learned a lot being under IMF. If anybody, there's again a referral if you need one. There's just nobody like them. I shouldn't say nobody, there are a few, but they're few and far between. This ministry believes in women in ministry as well as men in ministry. They have been tremendous door openers for me. They can teach you a lot, help you get incorporated, whatever, become a part of them. I was going to be down in the cities for a luncheon with them today and then see you, but that changed. But anyway, I love them.
Okay. Well, I'll add their information in the show notes so that that would be a resource that somebody could look into if they have something on the horizon
Yeah.
too. So thank you for that. Well, I wanted to kind of wrap up and, like you said, maybe I'll have you back on again. We can share some more stories about your journey and all that's to come. And I would love for you to share, just even in these last 10 years, global seed planters, what would you want to share?
We have become more and more laser focused. A month ago, how I described us changed. I was studying a map of a radical Muslim country. And as I was studying this map and praying about where do we go next, Lord, what should we focus on, he drew me to some regions of the map. One region of this map was an area called the Last Frontier. Another thing I noticed in the map was there was a river that was running down through the middle of the country. And with real small print, the river was named Swat.
What?
SWAT, SWAT. And God spoke to me in a way that I had never heard him describe us before. I've always been global seed planters, right? But he said, Diane, Global Seed Planters is not just a mission organization. You are my SWAT team. You use specific weapons and tactics, and you're on a critical mission to go to specific locations for a specific purpose, to bring me to the ends of the earth. You're a SWAT team focused on the last frontiers. And I sat there and went, wow, Lord, that's exactly who we are.
Here it is. There's your mission
And
statement.
he said, that has never been clearer, Diane. It's who you are. You need to describe yourself to people like this. You're not just one of my mission organizations, Diane. You're my SWAT team. And so that's kind of how I'd end it, to say, yeah, the Lord has called us to the hard places, the hostile places, the places of great persecution, to I say thumb. We're called to thumb. It's an acronym for T is for tribal, H is for Hindu, U is for unreligious, think communist, M is for Muslim, and B is for Buddhist. So we're going into these hostile, restricted, persecuted nations, and we're having strategic ways to bring the good news of Jesus to these rural places in these hostile nations. And so here's one, and I end with this. We targeted a radical Muslim nation this last 2 years. It's been a slow process. We believe in indigenous missionaries, not the great white hope. So we identified a couple in this country that were locals from the country, and we sent them to a hostile Muslim area of their own nation. We started a small business with them. We supported them monthly. We bought a motorcycle for them so they could move freely around this restricted rural village area where everyone was radical Muslims, where there was not a single believer ever known, no churches, no missionaries, no pastors, off the grid. We started trying to build a relationship with this small tribal people group that were embedded in many little villages. We began to try to build relationships with a person of peace. We were hoping for, would somebody say, hey, you're foreign to our village, come on in and have a cup of tea, where we could just see a little crack in the door, you know? Then we began to build that friendship with our couple, and gradually the ice began to thaw, you might say, in their hearts. And there began to be discussions about Islam versus Christianity, or Jesus and Allah. And we begin to see some curiosity being aroused among them. So we sewed in some audio solar players with stories of God and stories from the Bible in this people group. And then last Christmas, we decided, Jesus is not just tell. He's show and tell. He's like kindergarten. Show, then tell. And so I said to a strategic partner I have, hey, we need to bring food relief into the most vulnerable among them, but let's not choose. Let's go to the village chief and the elders and let them pick who are the most needy among them. So they selected about 50 widows, elderly, handicapped, blind, just the most vulnerable people in their people group. So we brought in about 2,500 pounds of food, about 50 pounds per household. And you know what happened, Kristen? Whoosh! The doors of their hearts were immediately unlocked and flew open. Why? Because they said we've been Muslims all our life, and we have prayed faithfully to Allah. We never missed going to the mosque. We have been good Muslims, and we've never seen Allah do anything for us. Then these people come talking about a different God named Esau. And he loves us. And he's heard our prayers, and he's been kind, and he's brought us food. By May, we had the first 2 believers in the history of the world among this people group. But that's not all. When it got to 7, I was like crying for joy, because, wow, Lord, when I get to heaven, there's going to be people around the throne from this tribe. Then fast forward to this last month. While I was doing the running around raising funds for the ministry, there was a guy from London who's Pakistani, and he went over there to do some boots on the ground, field report, to see how things really truly are going and to have eyes on it. And he comes back with a report last week. We thought there was just a small handful of believers. That's not true. Since May, this people group has seen 1,090 give their life to Jesus.
1,090?
Radical Muslims in a radical Muslim nation surrender their lives to Jesus largely because of the food relief, because they encountered a God who is nice and good and kind. And they're kind of like the woman at Jesus' feet. All they wanted to do was follow him.
Diane,
I'm having a lot of fun, Kristen.
I'm telling you. Oh my goodness. And it's just starting. I mean, it's just the beginning there, right?
Right? Right? I mean, I'm talking to the Lord. I don't want to make my own plans, but I'm going, wow, Lord, this is fun. Mm-hmm. And if there's any other place up there we're supposed to be going, you just let us know.
Yeah, but I'm sure he will.
You know what we figured out too? This is the wild part. This cost us $10,000.
Wow.
This is all we spent to reach this completely lost people group and bring them the greatest story ever told. $10,000 for 1,090 believers already. Like that ROI is off the charts.
Yeah.
You know, it costs between 8,000 and 10,000 to support a Western missionary a month. Mm-hmm. We're hiring indigenous missionaries in their own countries. This couple costs us $300. We are fully supporting them for $300 a month.
Oh my goodness!
It's just God is so smart.
Unbelievable.
It doesn't. You look at Jesus' life. It doesn't take millions to reach lives. Right. Jesus just showed us the most simple way. He wasn't born in a time with airplanes and cars and everything. He was born in a time where you had 2 feet. And look at this. Here he sits. Jesus changed the world. And all he did was walk in the smallest country in the world.
Amen. Oh, thank you for that testimony. I truly believe, I want to kind of segue into how people can support you and Global Seed Partners, because I do believe that you're an amazing SWAT team that is doing amazing things in partnership with the Lord. You know, one of the things that prompted me to do this Seedcast was that every time I do this, it's for the one. Now, there might be more than one person listening to this today, but I want you to just imagine that one, usually woman, listening. What would you like to say to her? And would you be open to praying over her today?
Sure. So if you're the one woman out there, don't for a moment think, well, this is Diane's story, but it never could be part of mine for whatever reasons. You know, the statement that used to be, it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, it takes a village of women to reach the world. And we all do our part. We're not all called to do the same thing. Maybe there's a woman out there listening. You're in a nursing home. You might even be on hospice. I don't know. But you know what? You can change the world through prayer. Like if you just pray for me, pray for Diane Brask and Global Seed Planners. Do you know the power of your prayer as you partner with God? Maybe you could be an advocate or an ambassador for us. And you could say, man, I heard this amazing podcast. I need to share this with somebody you know. And you send a link to them and say, you got to check this out. So the way you change the world is you're an ambassador. You could be a businesswoman. You could be a highly successful woman. As I shared a little bit at the end, it takes money also to reach the world. We're praying this year for $1 million to come in by year end. I really want to see Global Seed Planners be $1 million a year minimum mission organization focused. You know, when SWAT teams go out, they never lack for supplies. Never. A SWAT team has all the money, the resources, the equipment, the intelligence that they need to fulfill their critical mission. That's where we're at. I never want to say to the Lord or to anybody, sorry, the GSP SWAT team can't go there because we don't have any money. Man, If you have millions that you don't know what to do with, I just might make a suggestion that you contact me.
Yes.
I'll be able to help you. And so, yeah, globalseedplanters.org. You can give right online, globalseedplanters.org. You can give to Greatest Need. You can also contact our office number. I don't have that in front of me right now, but Kristen has it. She can give you some of that information at the end too. But I sure hope this isn't just me talking to dead air. I hope that there are those of you out there listening that have been deeply moved and you've heard more than my voice. You've heard the voice of the Lord and you have responded with, "Here I am, Lord, use me too." And so I'm hoping to hear from you.
Thank you, Diane. I will add all of the information to get a hold of Diane and Global Seed Partners website in the show notes.
Planters, Global Seed Planters.
Why do I keep saying partners?
You know, everybody wants to do that. I don't know.
Huh. Anyways, it's Global Seed Planters. Thank you. So I will add that information to the show notes. And I hope you guys have all been just deeply blessed by Diane's testimony, what she's doing. I know I was the first time I talked to her. We definitely are kindred spirits. And I'm so thankful for your brave voice that is setting others free in more ways than one. So I'm going to close out the podcast today with the anchoring verse over Hope Unlocked. It's, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit, you may abound in hope." And that's Romans 15:13. So thank you again, Diane. I would love to have you back on, and we'll talk soon. I'll be back with another episode next week.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It was really a privilege to be with you.
Yes, thank you, Diane.
Okay, bye-bye.